Hi, this is Mohammed Ali. Assalamu alaikum. We are on Congregate Live. This is season 2, and our theme today is going to be public art fighting for space. For those who have joined in for the first time, we have been running for a number of weeks now, well, a couple of months actually now, over the lockdown period. And this platform really is, like the rest of the world, turning to live streaming and Zoom for us to kind of connect and share and exchange ideas and thoughts and make sense of the kind of crazy, unprecedented kind of time that we've been through and the kind of situations that have kind of unfolded. The Corona period where, you know, we've been sitting in our homes and trying to make sense of things. And we've had various themes every month as creatives, as academics, as activists, and gathered them from around the world. And quite literally, we've had guests from different places, from Australia, from the US, you know, across Europe. We've even had doctors on the front line, kind of in our stream, kind of conversing with creative and artists, you know, all in the same space, sharing. So we've been very passionate about continuing our live streaming and bringing something a little bit fresh, because, you know, I think everybody can relate to this kind of Zoom gloom that we're all experiencing, of where we kind of just sitting there, you know, looking at images of one another, and, you know, there's not much more to it beyond that. You know, it's great to get our feelings out, but actually creatively express. And quite literally, we've had artists performing, sharing pieces, drawing even. I've been drawing on my iPad at times. I've got my Apple Pencil here, my iPad, which you'll be able to see on the screen shortly. But we've really enjoyed kind of sharing over the past few months. So we've always attempted to kind of cover hard-hitting topics that are relevant, that are, you know, almost the elephant in the room perhaps, and we're not shying away from these topics. You know, we've explored, of course, right in the midst of it, and we continue to do so, you know, Black Lives Matter and how it kind of, you know, grabbed the world's attention. You know, we've explored these topics, and we're continuing even in today's show. That is still kind of running through it as almost kind of a thread that is consistently there. You know, it's a problem that hasn't been going anywhere, and it's still continuing to do so, and trickles through into the other topics that we're exploring. So the topic we're exploring today is public art and fighting for space. I should share, really, I mean, we're kind of really off the, I'm going to introduce all the other guests shortly, and they will kind of explore, you know, share a little bit more about what we're exactly talking about there. But that's what we've got coming up. Before I introduce the guests, however, I'm going to just share that this live stream is supported by Raise Karma. You'll see that it's going out on the Raise Karma YouTube channel, who are our partners behind this. It's kind of they describe it as a virtual art installation. So over the coming month, our show is part of many other shows with other artists from around the globe, and we are kind of one of those shows. Basically, it goes out on Soul City Arts, our organization, our community arts organization based in Birmingham. Is the people behind this. It's where I'm an artistic director, and of course we have the University of Warwick and James Hodkinson, who's in this conversation, who are also the key partners who are supporting this season. So I'm going to hand over now to introduce actually. First of all, we've got James from University of Warwick.
Good morning. I'm speaking to you live from Melbourne, so it's a bit dark outside here, but it's great to be connected again. Looking forward to a cool conversation.
And then we have, I'm going to jump to Manpreet. No, I would jump to Essam, but you know something, just to show you that we're trying to create a polished kind of environment for you with this immersive design and everything. But sometimes Essam just stepped away from the camera just to show that we are humans here. We do make mistakes. So Essam's back. Yeah, I was talking to a blank wall for a minute, but he's back. Essam Mohammed, all the way from Seattle, is a young artist that I've kind of been connected with for many years now. Essam.
How y'all doing? It's a pleasure to be here in this virtual space, this new reality. But yeah, I'm an artist from Seattle, Washington, and you know, I've been working with Aerosol for a while now, and he's somebody that mentored me and really looked out for me, So I think it's good that we're having this discussion and just kind of like drawing the parallel between the States and the UK and different parts of the world on everything that's been going around, and how the situation and the ripple effect really got around the globe, with the movement.
Fantastic. So we're going to come back to Essam, and he's going to do some performance and respond to the conversation as well. He'll be listening in to the conversation. Just to add as well, we also have Cleveland Watkins usually on our show, but he's going to be back with us very soon in the coming shows. So we have kind of a rotation of different artists that are going to be coming through, and Essam is this week's one of our guests, and of course, not forgetting someone who does a much better job at that kind of radio voice. You'll listen to his voice, yeah. Man, he's a radio DJ, so that's how he does it so well. So Manpreet, who's going to be manning the decks, kind of dropping in visuals and keeping it flowing. Manpreet.
I hype up a bit too much, bro. Because now I'm talking, they're going to like, what the hell? His voice is just normal. You know what I mean? I can't put on a radio voice like, welcome to Congregate. We were just talking before the show went live that when we first started Congregate three-ish months ago, now being on episode 8 or 9, I'm losing track, but this window here was completely dark, right? And it just shows how long we've been in this kind of lockdown period. I feel like it's still confusing about what we can and can't do here in the UK. I don't know how other people are feeling. And I know, talking to Essam, who's in Seattle, I'm not going to make any jokes about being sleepless or anything like that, because I'll save that for another time. But literally, there is these parallels happening with COVID, with all these different, big protests that are manifesting all around the world in terms of Black Lives Matter and some of the key topics and key things that we're focusing on. And in this particular episode, talking about public art and how we as individuals can claim our own art space, but also the tension between that. So I'm really excited about today's show. And really excited to be having this discussion once again. Don't forget to drop your names in the comments. Tell us where you're listening from. Tell us where you're watching this live stream. We'd love to know which part of the world you are, so we know where our viewers are from. But also just to get a feel of this global family that we're creating and that we're a part of through Raise Karma and through Congregate and Soul City Arts. So big shout out to you guys, and we'd love to hear from you.
Fantastic. So we are gonna, before anything, we're just gonna get a little video recap, some kind of visuals that we like to play with. So it isn't just all us talking you to death, but actually creating some visual experience. And what I like to describe as kind of an immersive kind of live stream, so that you've got sounds and visuals that kind of tell the story really, that or what we're exploring. So over to you, Manpreet, if you could share something that we just cooked up a little earlier.
So good morning again from Melbourne. My name is James Hodkinson. I'm good to be part of this discussion again. I'm going to throw in a few questions there. Being an academic, I tend to bring a bit of a historical perspective to some of these debates. Now, when we talk about public art, what do we actually mean? I mean, there's two real things that, in terms of the people who are here today, might think about when we talk about public art. On the one hand, we've got the whole legacy of statues and monuments in public places, which have become contested. Yeah, they've become things that people are arguing about. But on the other hand, we've got the whole practice of urban art, and we've got two arguably urban artists in the room. Essam and Mohammed are both people who would kind of identify with being involved in what would be broadly called hip-hop culture, which is kind of all about reclaiming urban spaces, taking back over the city, giving people a voice and a space to express themselves visually and through language and through music. So today's episode is going to kind of pivot backwards and forwards between those two things. But I'd like to start by taking the more historical perspective, so we get a sense of that this debate is not just something that's been happening in the last few weeks, but it's been going on for several years. And actually, it goes back to a history that goes back for centuries. We saw there in that video, didn't we, some recent topplings of statues. Now, think about what that actually means to you. When you think about statues being toppled, iconic moments in your lifetime. I remember seeing, around the time of the invasion of Iraq, I remember seeing a massive statue of Saddam Hussein being toppled in Iraq shortly after the Iraqi capital fell. And I remember seeing a lot of Saddam Hussein's enemies, actually Iraqi enemies, taking their shoes off and beating the statue with the soles of their shoes, which in the Arabic context, Essam will, I think, back me up on that, it's actually an insult to show, traditional Arabic culture, to show the sole of your feet. And so they're beating a statue with their shoes as a sign of disrespect to this person who they felt had oppressed them. Now, a lot of people, particularly in the West, of course, at this point, in the US and the UK, in these kind of countries, were cheering at this point the toppling of this statue, which marked or went along with the toppling of that particular regime. But my question today is, what happens when this happens again, when it happens closer to home, right? Let's take a couple of years ago, in Virginia, right? You had the statue of Robert E. Lee, General Robert E. Lee, who's a kind of, I suppose, a kind of folk hero for a lot of people in the southern states of the United States, a leading Confederate general during the period of the American Civil War, but also seen as a man who very much had the blood of slavery on his hands. Right, and so this Black Lives Matter movement has been going for quite some time now. It's not just something that's exploded because of what happened to George Floyd. It's something, this argument about which monuments or which statues belong in our marketplaces, in our town squares, that's been going for quite some time. And Robert E. Lee's statue was removed, in 2017 in Virginia. So you already have a debate that's going on between activists, communities, between the civil authorities in many cities, and there's already a process underway of reviewing what should go where. And this opens out the broader question, I suppose, as who controls these public spaces, who gets to decide, who has a voice in deciding what goes where. A lot of people in Virginia, or the southern states of America, white people from particular communities, saw this as an affront to their identity and their culture, that this statue should be removed. But many Black Americans, many African Americans would have seen that statue day by day by day, knowing full well who he was. And that was a daily affront to their identity, to their history, to who they were, rubbing literally salt into the wounds. We saw in that video footage as well that Manpreet screened for us a moment ago, a statue of this man, Edward Colston, right, in Bristol in the UK, whose statue was toppled at the heart of recent protests and thrown into, I think, the harbour. And since it's been rescued, and there's debate about what should happen to that. Should it just be completely demolished and got rid of? Or should it now be put in a museum so that it's in a different context, so people can still see it, but they know him for what he is and he's no longer being celebrated? I think it's fair to say a lot of people did not know the name of Colston up until a couple of weeks ago. But certainly people in Bristol will have done. And that statue became a real focus. And finally, let's draw on another example actually before we go any further. To get really to the heart of the British establishment, there's another figure, right? This is a figure who appears on banknotes. This is a figure who is very much associated with the Britain in the Second World War and the fight against Nazism, right? This is Winston Churchill, right? So Winston Churchill, seen as one of the greatest Britons of all time. Statues of Churchill have come under fire as well. They've come under debate. They've been defaced. They've been graffitied. They've been the subject of debate about whether or not they should be removed. Not only police, but also people have turned out to protect those statues against what they see as a threat. So I'm going to ask Manpreet now to roll another video, which we're going to use and take the discussion a bit further.
This whole issue of statues and memorials has become a very sort of emotive subject. Do you personally think that the statue of Churchill should come down? Is it right to be there? Was he racist?
This whole issue around the focus on statues, I think it's detracting from the main issue of what everyone has been on the streets, on social media, writing to me and other MPs about over the last 2.5 weeks. It's about people demanding a big open conversation about some of the structural inequality and racism that unfortunately still exists in our society.
Just to come back to that specific question, do you think Churchill was a racist?
This isn't about whether Churchill was a racist or not. This is about, I want to see our national curriculum reflecting the historical things that happened in Britain. So that discussion, coupled in with the role that Churchill played during the war, you know, he's rightly held as a national hero, as a treasure because of his status in the war. But I want us to talk about other histories, the real British history.
And as a national hero, you'd be happy for that statue to stay?
I don't think this is about the statue. I'd want to see more statues going up. I think it's quite a shame that we don't have statues of more prominent Black Britons in the UK. So I beamed with pride when I saw the statue of Mary Seacole going up outside St Thomas's Hospital. We need to see more statues of Black Britons who've contributed so much to our country going up.
There was a really striking image this weekend of Patrick Hutchinson, a black guy carrying a white protester to safety on his shoulders. We spoke to Patrick and he said that he wanted equality for all of us. He wants things to be fair for his children and his grandchildren. I just wonder what your view of that image was.
I think it was such a powerful image. And I think it goes to show that this issue is not just a black issue. We need our white allies. We need everybody talking about this issue. Everyone saw what happened to George Floyd. People were moved. People who'd never been out on marches before were moved. So it's about using that energy, using that frustration to make sure that in weeks to come, we don't forget the hashtags, we don't forget the marches, we don't forget the people who've been out on the streets, but we actually see concrete proposals coming forward from our government on how they're going to address this.
Okay, so there's a bit of a montage of some recent television news footage that the guys put together here in our creative team. And at the heart of that particular feature was a British politician called Florence Eshelomey, who's an MP, a Member of Parliament for the Vauxhall ward in London constituency. And she was really getting involved in quite a heated debate there about precisely Churchill, who I said is this quite patriotic figure in British culture. But, you know, there's this, at the moment, there's this tendency for people to effectively, if they can't topple a statue, to go round and underneath the name plaque of the statue to add with a spray can, was a racist. Yeah, and so, you know, Churchill's quite well known for having said really negative things about African people, really negative things about Indian people from the Indian subcontinent, as well as being this great British war hero, as it were, this war leader. So he's quite an ambivalent figure in many ways. And the debate was going on there was about whether or not he should be memorialised. How should he be memorialised? Should he be there at all? If he is there, should he be there with a caveat, with another sign that says, and he also did these things as well, and he held these views? Should he be in a museum? And more importantly, should he be there to the exclusion of statues of a more diverse British public? So is the question perhaps not so much whether or not we need traditional statues there to these effectively white men, is the question, do we just need more statues of people from diverse backgrounds? So there's a lot of questions there. I'm still going to see if I can stop blathering now and actually draw in some opinions from the people we've got in the room. I'm going to throw a line out firstly to Essam, right? Essam's a hip-hop artist who's based over in Seattle on the far from our point of view, the distant west coast of America. But you've been, maybe Essam, you could tell us firstly a bit about yourself as an artist, and then how you've been feeling firstly about the protests, and what your take is a little bit on what's been going on with these kind of public spaces, and what you've seen happening where you live.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been to a couple protests myself, and I've seen, like, with my own eyes, like police cars getting burned and tear gas being thrown, people on the floor, pouring milk in their eyes, window shattering, and everything pretty much the media is showing, right? But unfortunately, like when you look at like the headlines and with the way the media is really portraying everything that's going on, it's the aspects of the way they want the people to be portrayed, you know. And when majority of the protests that's happening are peaceful protests, you know what I'm saying? And unfortunately, you know, it's reflected on, like, let's just say, like the looting and a lot of things that's been going on is reflecting on the Black Lives Matter movement and black people, when in reality, like I've seen with my own eyes, a lot of people that's doing the damage is white folks, you know. But the way the media is portraying it is as if it's black folks, you know what I'm saying? Because the movement is about Black Lives Matter, you know what I mean? So as we speak right now, there's a protest happening, a peaceful protest happening for one of my young brothers who was murdered by the police a few years ago. You know, his name was Eugene Nelson, a young black Muslim who was unarmed, and he was shot in the back. And this is the reality. Like, people are frustrated, you know what I'm saying? And this is something that it's not new. Right? It's been going on for so many years, let alone so many years, so many generations. And you know, the only reason that now everything is really going wildfire is because things are being documented right now, you know, and we're seeing it with our own eyes, and that's what's really, you know, bringing it to people's attention, right? So in regards to the protest and everything that's been going on, it's a response to the many generations of injustice that's been you know, taking place in our communities, you know. So you know, it's like, in reality, it's like, is people really going to tailor their focus to the protest and everything that's happening from the protest, or the root cause of what caused the protest to begin with? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess at the heart of the process as well is how represented a particular community feels. If you feel not represented or misrepresented by the media, then anger will grow. I guess one of the things that the public art, whether it's hip hop, graffiti, or a statue or a memorial, can do is it can give a sense of representation to a community, right? They see themselves represented finally in a particular memorial or in a mural on a wall, what have you. And there's a sense of ownership and representation that comes from that. Am I right in thinking that we were talking earlier about this kind of thing that's happened in Seattle with regards to the public actually taking over a space recently? Could you tell us a little bit, because we've probably not heard of that in all the news that's going around. Take us through what's happened, maybe.
It's funny because people from all around the world that I know, like this, from my travels with, sorry, you know, my phone is ringing right now. Hold on. There's a downside to virtual events. Let me just.
Hello, Dad. I'm just on a live show called Congregate, and I should go and answer that. Yeah. I answered it for you. Carry on. I answered it for you.
I just hung up. I don't know. Yeah, they keep on calling. I'm trying to, I guess this is a downside to virtual events, so we can't really control it. But so, like I was saying, just from my travels, you know, I've been around the world with my art. Hold on, my fault, man. Yeah, sorry about that. But hopefully they don't call again. If they call again, my apologies. Please be patient. Yeah. So pretty much with my travels, you know, I've met a lot of people around the world, and they've been messaging me, and they've been asking me, yo, I hope everything is going good in Seattle. It looks like it's going crazy, and I've watched. I don't like watching the news, but I watched some videos, and I'm like, yo, they're making it look like it's like what's that called? What's that movie called? What's that movie called? You know that movie where 24 hours there's no laws.
Oh, The Purge.
And everybody just goes crazy. Purge, yeah, they're making it look like The Purge. You know, people walking with AK-47s and what's that called? You know, people wilding. Yeah, I'm gonna just answer this real quick, just so I could make sure they don't call again.
Yeah. Go in the other room, bro.
Manpreet, maybe you could throw in some of the footage, Manpreet, of what's happening in Seattle. There.
You were seeing overlaid in this in the conversation from Essam is some of the images. They're on the screen, and the images are basically illustrating how the people in Seattle have kind of used their own initiative, but also use their own kind of approaches of taking over public spaces, right? And one image that you see pop up, I'm going to throw it back up on the screen in a second, is a big fist that was put outside of the police station, right, Essam? You're good, yeah? You're back?
Yeah, so I'm back now. Sorry about that, you know. But so pretty much, so this area, the CHOP, which stands for Capitol Hill Occupied Protest, is actually where I went to college, you know, and it's like 10 minutes away from my house, right? So they took over this whole area. They took over the precinct, the police station, and, you know, they crossed out police, Seattle Police Department. They crossed out the word police and put people, Seattle People Department. And, you know, you got tents, you know, people camping out. You got a truck that's offering medical services, free food that's being offered 24 hours a day. So I could go there with no money in my pocket and get taken care of, right? So
looks like
we might. I think Essam's been doing some really, really good technical issues with us today. I like that. She's really pushing us.
I keep on hearing stuff.
Did you get your phone? Did you get a phone call on your phone now? Because you're gonna get done. I think should we move on, James? I think in terms of
I mean, what really interested me there about what Essam was saying was that hearing that, you know, the word police had been kind of sprayed out, or that you would say it's as though that the public space had been taken over again. If you think about it, one of the things that's really interesting is the power of art and what it actually implies. If you think about it, there's this movement that's happening, ground roots movement that's happening, and people are actually seeking to suggest different ways of organizing society. We heard about Minneapolis, you know, following what happened with George Floyd. We heard about the Minneapolis situation, that there's talk now of completely disbanding and restructuring the police department there. And in a way, what that implies, that urban art, is somebody literally deleting, spraying through the word police and saying, we now own this space. Just trying to completely flip around the power relations in that public space. And in a way, that's what a lot of people are actually pushing for. So I guess that makes a lot of people feel very uncomfortable. It feels like, we said, rather like that film, The Purge, it feels like being on the edge of anarchy in a way. Yeah, because at the end of the day, that's what a lot of people are afraid of. They're afraid not so much of other people coming involved, but of there being complete breakdown of any kind of sense of law and order in our cities. And it makes people uncomfortable. I mean, just to maybe mention one final historical name drop before we move on. The figure as well, who's often associated in many cultures, is Mahatma Gandhi, right? So from the Indian point of view, this is a figure who's, as a pacifist, as a freedom fighter for the Indian subcontinent, he's quoted by people all around the world as being this iconic figure. But of course, there's people who always raise the issue that he had his own prejudices and his own views, right? So you see this iconic figure that I know, for example, Mohammed's painted a stencil of Gandhi, which I've seen, I've seen this around in his studio and what have you. It's an iconic figure. And he, like Churchill, in a way, and you would never maybe think of bringing those two people together, he has had statues to him defaced in parts of America, in parts of Africa. Yeah, Gandhi, his name crossed out, was a racist, sprayed under his statue. So the idea is that our public spaces are dynamic, right? We all want a voice, and at some point, without going down the alleyway of anarchy, effectively, at some point, somebody is going to be upset and somebody is going to be uncomfortable. Maybe that's the point with urban art, right? And really now we're kind of segueing into what counts as art. If our public spaces are frozen in time with monuments to the 19th century, what does that actually say about us today? And is the way forward to find ways of challenging that? Maybe that's what urban art is there for. Maybe it's going to make people feel uncomfortable for a while, but maybe that's where we are right now.
Indeed. It is interesting, isn't it? Like, what is it? What do these pre, like, I think the Edward Colston statue was from the 1600s, right? Or he was born at least in the 1600s, and what he represented was merchant trade, but also the the North Atlantic slave trade movement that happened, and rightfully so. Are we exalting these types of figures and saying these are the people, these are the barons, and these are the people of industry that we should be aspiring to be like? But then people are like, you know what, these people do not represent the world that we live in today. So there's a bit of a tension between what do we understand as these people who were made statues of, that turned them into statues, but what do we make of them as actual figureheads in society, because they're no longer here, they can't defend themselves, but at the same time, what did they represent? A lot of them did represent divisive figures, especially even Gandhi, from a Sikh perspective. I don't claim to speak for Sikhs, I don't claim to speak for a nation of people, but from what I understand of it is he was actually quite divisive in India as a person between different communities, different religions. So where are we placing these figures in terms of our own kind of moral absolutism? Do we say that they have to be perfect people, or if they've got a checkered history, do they need to go? And then that's the kind of the debate what we're having, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think from my point of view, I certainly from an academic perspective, I don't have a clear-cut answer for that. I don't have an answer today that says this statue should go or it should be moved into a museum where it can be explained what the checkered history was of this individual. I don't have an answer which says someone should have the right to come and take a spray can to a statue, or someone chop its head off or topple it. I'm not saying that should or shouldn't happen. I'm just saying that, one of the things that has happened is that our public spaces have become more fluid again, that there's a period of renegotiation going on where we're actually saying who is in control. And maybe at some point order or stability or settles down slightly. I know a lot of people don't want things to settle down until genuine change has happened. But maybe at that point, the point is we go through this period of chaos, of fluidity, and our public spaces will look different afterwards. They will reflect more. Maybe this is the only way that change happens, that we go through this discomfort.
Just on that point about you mentioned about museums and the conversations that occur about, how we should perceive these statues. I'll give you a kind of a practical example. I sit strategically. I know this will sound bizarre, as a street artist, as a graffiti artist that paints walls at night. I also sit on a number of boards and steering groups, and one of those is I'm a trustee of my city museum, Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery. And what's really interesting is having a conversation. I won't reveal too much of what was discussed, but I can tell you what, there are conversations happening on that strategic level that I'm able to contribute to talk about how do museums, and I know many people in the museum sector are discussing this, but certainly myself, of someone who is on a trustee in a strategic position, can bring to the table this discourse so that museums can reflect on what do we need to do? How do we respond? How do we adapt? So I'd say, just like how we saw in the earlier news clip about opening up that discourse, the great thing about this is that we are able to, ask we have to adapt, and people are looking at that now, and that's people of all color. And people can, the way I see it is, myself being someone who's from a minority background in the UK, and my city museum, if I'm not in such places, and how do we encourage those kind of conversations? That is something I'd say is so necessary, that we must engage on different levels. I'm a big advocate of of minority communities being represented at museums, at theaters, and being on boards and becoming trustees of big institutions, so that we can make that change on that level.
Indeed. I want to just go to the comments quickly and just see what people are saying regarding the discussion. I mean, it's an interesting discussion because we're hearing and we're seeing things happening in the news, like the Edward Colston thing. I think the video that we showed at the start of his kind of statue was completely desecrated, right? His face was sprayed red. He was pulled down. He was literally rolled across the street and then thrown into the harbor, right? So, it evokes different feelings and different emotions when we see these things. Some people, like James said, are disgusted and they're coming out to protest against it. And some people have an opinion of what these statues represent. Big shout out to Rashid, who's saying statues are only a branch of the pride taken from the British Empire's history. They've never apologized for many atrocities that have happened. Maybe we should call for that apology to come. What do you make of that, James?
Yeah, very much so. And I'm just looking at what Rashid says a bit further down the conversation thread when he says, in conflict resolution, without owning the wrong that has been done, true peace never comes. So there's this sense that before anything can settle down again, before we can say what the new order is and what our spaces will look like, the apology and the context need to come out. What has happened? What has been done to make that right? And not just, in a kind of cosmetic way, but how is the structure of society going to change? Yeah, where are the diverse voices in governments, in institutions to help advocate for that change before things settle down again and just go back to the way they were?
There was a.
It's interesting to hear.
Sorry, James. Go on.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say it's interesting to work out what Mohammed was saying there, but where things belong. Because I've got I spent a lot of time in Germany. I've got a piece of the Berlin Wall, right? And the Berlin Wall used to be a concrete reality going right down the middle of the city. It was graffitied to hell, and now chunks of it are actually in museums or in people's homes. So that was once an arrestable offence, to be spraying on that wall. And now that wall, in parts, is in a museum. Yeah, or on my shelf behind me, actually, a chunk of it. I own a bit of it, about the size of my fist. So it's interesting to say, isn't it, the journey that these artworks can go on, because at the moment, these things might be seen as damage, right? As a kind of violation of a public space. But that violation becomes a statement which one day ends up in a museum and tells its own story. So maybe that's what's going to happen. Maybe one day Colston's statue won't be restored, but maybe it will be there, defaced, and that's the story it tells.
That's interesting. And when you and this sorry about earlier, but my camera, everything is good now.
Welcome back, bro. Welcome to the party, bro.
I didn't see that.
I said, welcome back to the party, bro. I know you had your dad on the phone.
Yeah, man. No, but just adding to that point, it's like when you look at even like with the art form of like hip hop, when you look at how it started, like in the Bronx and the East Coast, it started out as an art form, like really standing out and speaking up against the oppression that was happening in Black and brown communities, you know what I mean? Through graffiti, through creative expression, through rap, MCing, So when you look at like these different things, like a lot of what we're seeing right now, and a lot of what people may be seeing as vandalism is exactly what they were saying about hip hop, back in the day. And now hip hop is one of the most influential cultures in the world. You know what I mean? Every corner of the globe you go to, you're gonna see hip hop culture. So I mean, it's interesting, man. And also it's also interesting because you guys are speaking about the UK, Europe, but like in the States, it's like, all right, yeah, these statues, like today or yesterday, the George Washington statue was teared down, and a lot of people are responding to it like, oh, why would they do that? But in reality, it's like, let's acknowledge what land we're on to begin with. This is native soil, this is Native American land to begin with, right? So I think the conversation really has to go in the direction of, okay, like who was looted and whose property was stolen from to begin with, what I'm saying? So I think when we look at it from and not too long ago, like when we're actually looking at the practicalities, how many 100 years ago, it was in recent time, so I think when we really put the conversation and circle it around there, then I think the understanding of, okay, who are passing these laws? Like, in not too long ago, it was illegal for black folks to you know what I mean, integrate with society, you know, like with white society in the United States, and that was a part of law, you know. So like, if we're talking about law, it's like law was never always in favor of the people to begin with, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you know, we talk about doing damage to a statue or doing damage to a wall. I mean, that wall and that statue were built on damage. They're built on the damage to indigenous populations, built on the damage to the enslaved populations who did the work to build those things, to put those things in place. And speaking here from the Australian perspective, we spoke about the ripple round of the Black Lives Matter movement. It's re-triggered or re-fired debates here around indigenous Aboriginal Australians and their land rights. So when the white settlers arrived in Australia, one of the ways they got around having to have a treaty or an agreement with indigenous people was they were regarded as having no culture, and this was terra nullius, as they called it, because there were no settlements. These were nomadic people, as they were seen. They had no land rights, so there was no bargaining to be had. And the struggle now for Black Australians, for Indigenous Australians, is to get a treaty. And so the big slogan is treaty now. It's about recognition. And they see, you know, a huge aspect of their culture is to see how their land has been taken over and defaced, right? They have a view of the natural world as being a kind of organic whole. And the bushfires which ravaged through Australia are seen as kind of a product of climate change and of Western society and capitalism. And it's a kind of wound on the landscape for them. So that resonates, I think, with the First Nations discussion that Essam was bringing there to the table a moment ago. I was wondering if we could talk. I mean, we've also got another great our resident artist, our visual artist, Mohammed, is also obviously by reputation a great urban artist, and he's got his own stories to tell about how he's over the years fought for space and representation. I mean, that's kind of at the heart of what he's been doing. We've got some material to show, and Mohammed's got his own story to share. I'm wondering if we could throw a line to you now and hear what you've got to say.
Mohammed, while you switch your camera, because what we're seeing a little bit of Mohammed's top view. You can see his workstation. You can see he's creating this live iPad piece that you can see on the screen right now. By the way, we didn't really spend a lot of time describing what this is, what he's doing. I know the regular viewers of the show will know the format, that Mohammed is in the background creating some art, creating some visual pieces to kind of complement what is happening in the conversation. And I just want to quickly go to, before Mohammed, do you want to switch back to your... switch back to that, and I'll read a couple of the comments in the meantime. I want to give a shout out to Hardeep Jahal, Black Country dude, joining the show is what he says, and he was responding a little bit earlier on to the conversation about Gandhi, and he was saying Gandhi was no saint, he was a politician, right? And he thinks that he's saying, I think that the British government will have to confess their mistreatment and classical racist that was practiced at the time. And he was saying at work, I was having a conversation that Britain did not declare war because they were against the Nazi race ideology, because it was a threat to British rule. I think we might be getting into a different topic here, but it's an interesting point that, you know, he's saying that there's some institutional racism and some racism, classical racism, that goes back many, many years. And by that he's talking about the fight against the British Empire and the dismantling of the British Empire. We also have Destiny Mohammed, shout out to you, saying segregation was in full effect in the US until the late 1960s. And Stephen Stanier saying there can never be justice for stolen land, and he's referencing a line by Chuck D. Which I think all really interesting contributions. So thank you so much for your comments. Obviously, as the conversation continues and as we're exploring these themes, and Mohammed's going to talk a bit about his background of creating art in the public space, we'd love to know what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what are some of the thoughts and emotions that come up when these conversations are happening. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear. The whole point of this is to connect with you guys and hear what the audience is thinking about these topics. So we're trying to reflect on pertinent, burning issues that are happening at the moment. So Mohammed's camera's back on. So Mohammed, I'm going to cut back to you, bro.
Yeah, bro. Thank you, bro. Yeah, I've just saw another comment that just come in from Outdoor Places, Unusual Spaces. That's an interesting YouTube channel. So the comment was, statues are celebrations of people. They aren't history. We absolutely should be removing statues of oppressors. Put simply, they are not to be celebrated. Now, I agree with that notion. And I would say, as a street artist, this dilemma that we sometimes face, even as a street artist, I suppose the very nature of putting something in a public space, in particular as a street artist, it's ephemeral nature, something that is kind of just a moment in time, but it kind of passes and things are replaced. I mean, the very nature of street art was that it was out in the outdoors, and it kind of slowly might decay and erode away, and what might be here one time will not be there. I say that the challenge that one faces, even as a street artist, I would say, with my own practice, I've found is that sometimes I've painted something, and I'm going back to something that might be 15 years ago. I painted something, and I look back on it, something that's still there till this day, and I look at it and I think context has changed, the feeling has even changed, the sentiment has perhaps evolved of this cause that I was fighting at that time. I'm not saying it's changed, but certainly at that moment in time I was capturing this specific feeling and sentiment. But right now it's very different. So looking at it right now in the same place 10 years later, I kind of even look at it and go, doesn't feel quite right. That was a moment in time. And I do feel actually that needs to be updated. So even in the short term, not talking hundreds of years, even a piece of street art, sometimes I see and say, it's not something that can be almost timeless, right? So absolutely, I'd say I'm a firm believer that anything painted in the public, I don't get precious about my art. I think it's necessary. In fact, the early graffiti art, when it began and started in the subways of New York, go back to the 70s, they always knew that this art was just a fleeting moment. And in fact, the thing that was really captured was the digital, not the digital, but the kind of printed picture, using an old camera where you'd capture a picture of a passing subway, a train carriage, right? You would capture the picture, and those who remember and know the history of graffiti, Subway Art, that book that everybody was said to be the most stolen book ever, by the way. I paid for that, just so you know. So that book, everyone who knows the book that documented this movement of young people painting train carriages. They knew that these train carriages would be painted out by the New York authorities. They were buffed, they were cleaned. That was the language that was used. They were cleaned with this chemical wash, and they would disappear. And you only had the photograph to capture that moment, and you would be sharing pictures. And of course, with the advent of internet, it's changed that, because now you could share your pictures even further wide. But at those times, you would have your printed pictures, and you'd be passing them around to your friends and showing these moments that were really kind of long gone, but you would kind of capture them and to look back on them. So I think it's just really interesting of how, as a street artist, I'd say over years I've learned to see how even a piece of street art on a wall, there are much more mature ways to look at it. At one time I probably would have got a bit upset, but I began to realize you're an artist that actually also is painting in a public space, right? And as a street artist, sometimes there's a kind of a selfishness of you imposing an image upon a community. And I'm going to share with you an example of a big turning point for me, a story, an incident that happened that changed everything for me, right? And some street artists might not be able to identify with what I'm saying, because I get it. Sometimes a street artist just paints what they want to paint, and they will put it on a wall and say, that's my vision. That's what I'm feeling right now. I'm now in a point where I felt like doing that was almost disrespectful to the people, right? When I'm painting in people's neighborhoods. So I tell you what happened. It was about 10 years ago when I was painting something in the city of Birmingham, and it was not long after when Israel was bombing Gaza, bombing the crap out of Gaza, and I had painted all these murals across my city in support of the plight of the Palestinians. And I was painting this mural, and there was about 50 people on this street corner in Birmingham, in Small Heath in Birmingham. Those who are from Birmingham, anyone here on the chat from Birmingham, Rashid. I know you are. So yeah, Small Heath in Birmingham, which is predominantly, you know, an area where there's a high migrant community, in particular Muslim community. And I knew there was massive support for these murals I was painting. And to be honest, in general, a lot of the murals I was painting, they were popping up in these neighborhoods, and people were like, you know, they loved what I did. You know, and I got a great buzz from that. There's no denying that. I love the fact that I could use my art as a way to celebrate minority communities, people who perhaps felt didn't have a voice, could celebrate these murals. Now, there's about 50 people on the street corner, because that's what happened. You just painted a wall. Before you know it, there's a big crowd behind you, right? There was media as well, BBC Newsnight, those in the UK. It was Jeremy Paxman's BBC Newsnight show, right? They were there filming this mural. So it was a great buzz, like, wow, this is getting like prime time BBC coverage, you know? And then suddenly a car pulled up alongside me, and a guy shouted from the car, and he said, while I'm on the top of the ladder, he said to me from the car, "Yo, bro, what do you think you're doing?" Right? And I said, I was a bit puzzled, bemused. I shouted back to the guy. He was very, you know, quite hostile. And I said to him, I'm painting a mural. What do you think? And his response was something I'll never forget. He said, "What do you think this is, the Bronx?" And I remember those words. I thought, here was somebody. It was all these people in this corner, all, you know, wanting this piece of art. And here was one individual who was from the local area who said, "I don't want this here." And then this idea that from what he said, I interpret that as you're ghettoizing this area by adding your street art. And as no matter how colorful it was, how artistic and aesthetically, you know, vibrant it was, he didn't want that there. And that made me, I stopped painting for a long time after, because I felt that here was someone. I go back to my neighborhood. I don't live in that neighborhood, but I felt like I was imposing this piece of art on him. And I felt like, you know, it's his neighborhood. He sees this every day, not me. And I felt like my process of engaging people, of at least taking time out to just listen and immerse myself in people, rather than what often happens, you parachute into a neighborhood and you leave again, right? And I became very, very disillusioned with my process as an artist, of at the very least not respecting the people that I'm painting for, not giving them the time. And it changed my entire approach. And I started to think about what do people want to see in a neighborhood? And I'm not suggesting we paint by numbers and we paint by committee, right? And we put it to the people to decide what I should paint or what we should paint, but at least involve them and respect them and listen to their stories, so that you can help empower them and go on a journey with them, rather
it's similar
than do something for them.
It's just your general participation, right? If you want to build compliance, or you want people to respect policies or laws, then you can't drop policies and laws on people either, right? You have to go through a democratic process to a certain extent and get their feedback, get their buy-in, and understand what their needs are. So it's not only responsive, but it's also come from the people as well. So have you found, Mohammed, that when you've done that process later on, and I know you've painted in communities all across the world, from Johannesburg to Melbourne to you know, to places in America and different places in Africa and whatnot, have you found that when you've connected with people and asked them their story and reflected their story, that they protect this piece of art that's created on the wall or in a community a lot more, right? They're more receptive to it because it represents them, right?
Absolutely. You know, people, I could tell you incidents. There was a time someone phoned me about midnight and said, "I'm at a junction of a mural you painted, and I just had to tell you what I saw." And he tells me that he saw an elderly lady who was walking past my mural. And as she walked past it, she was like stroking the wall with the palm of her hand. And she wasn't even looking at the wall. It was like just something that instinctively she did. And then as she left the mural, she let go. He said, I couldn't believe it, the connection she had with a set of bricks, a bit of concrete, right? And so definitely I'd say that kind of resonance that it creates, the protection, you're quite right, absolutely. There are people who guard these murals now. And you know, the funny thing is, I look at certain pieces of art I painted 10, 15 years ago. And although I feel like I want to change that, or I feel the context has changed, it needs updating, I know that some murals are like, I can't do that because people are so precious and so like protective of these murals that are now landmarks in their neighborhood, they would probably fight me if I said, hey, listen, I need to change that now. So it's just really interesting of how people, people's ownership, people's connection. And I think, my God, you just, like you said, it's not rocket science. City councils, city authorities, governments, policymakers, come and engage with people on a street corner, come and connect with people. Why is there this kind of disparity between authority and institution and people here? And I always say to policymakers and the strategic places that I sit on, they say, come into these neighborhoods, come and stand with me on a corner, and you'll see what a graffiti art mural, what difference it makes. Yeah.
Well, some of the pictures that you're seeing on the screen now regarding the recent I Can't Breathe image that Mohammed painted. The story of that, it's a real weird story and an interesting story as well, is that first it got completely whitewashed by the city council, and now it's protected by this frame, which is a really kind of weird framing of the way they've done it. It's not that nice. But do you want to talk about that and how that happened?
Sure. I mean, look, the of course, within days of the situation that took place in the US, we were all in lockdown as well, so it was kind of a difficult one. Actually, when lockdown happened, a natural instinct of any street artist is let's paint the town because everyone's at home and we can just paint. Yeah, the world is your canvas, right? The city is our canvas. But actually, I was thinking about, being in lockdown and, you could argue, I know it's almost an oxymoron, but being a respectful graffiti artist, actually thinking, well, actually, I need to respect the rules of lockdown and the strain that I might cause if I fall ill and go into hospital. And you know what I mean? I had to really think and juggle my responsibility as someone who wants to speak truth and paint them on concrete blocks for all to see, and at the same time abide by certain rules that are there. Actually, there's great logic in that. So I wasn't painting for a good chunk of the lockdown period, but then that changed when, of course, when we saw what took place with George Floyd and the words "I can't breathe" that just really screamed out. Those words are profound. They really, truly are. Just stop you in your tracks. And I felt like I have to paint this. Of course, lockdown rules eased, and I felt this was a good time to get out there. And I painted with social distancing, of course, with my daughter. My daughter came along and she helped me as well. My daughter's 13 years old, and we painted. And it was meant to be just a one-off piece in my local area where I live, just a one-off piece, right? Within 12 hours, it was removed by Birmingham City Council. Within 12 hours. And there was uproar. People kind of almost united and got together and felt, how can this happen? How dare they take this off? So with the removal of it, actually, there was a kind of a blessing in it, because suddenly it went on kind of, to the main 6 o'clock news, and, people were talking about it more so. And actually, as I said, it was probably a blessing in a way. Then when it was painted off, of course, I went back. The next day I went and painted it. The city authorities apologized. There was all kinds of exchanges taking place. And I felt like, I painted that same image. I broke my usual protocol. Normally an image like that, it's just a one-off. I painted it in like 8 different places across different neighborhoods. And then we projected it, the image that you see, this very image that that's on my t-shirt, in fact, as well, right? So you can get this t-shirt, by the way, as well, which is 100% proceeds will go into a social justice charity.
You need to stand up and show.
Oh, really? You can't see it?
The merch that's on sale.
Oh,
no,
really?
It's not merch. I shouldn't say that. It's for a social cause, and like Mohammed said, the proceeds are going to social justice charity, and that's what we're all about. Soul City Arts, that's what Congregate's about. That's why we're supported by University of Warwick and Race Karma, because there's a real discussion and narrative that's happening. Where can we get these from anyway? I think we should talk about it.
You can get, of course. There's a white one as well, just like on the wall, but I'm a fan of the black one, to be honest. Now these t-shirts, as I said, all the proceeds go to a social justice charity. The message continues to go out there, before things die down, and I'm a firm believer of that with street art, things might change, things stop kind of fizzle out a little bit, but that mural is still there to remind people before it becomes a distant memory. So as I said, these are available. Where are they available? Let's see. At the moment, they are available in King's Heath, in Birmingham, because that's my local area, you can go to a coffee shop called RA Coffee House. I know that isn't helpful for all the global people watching right now, but for those who are national, just DM me on Instagram or on Twitter, Ali Aerosol, and I'll send you some details of how we can get that to you. I'm still formulating the plan. I'm not very good at doing merch. That's one of my weakest points, actually, of commercializing stuff. Story of my life. But anyway, as I said, the mural is back again, and not only that, this image, you could see it projected next to the major train station here. As you're coming into into the city of Birmingham on the train, you're going to see this image 100 times the size of this, right? And that's the beauty of they can wipe it out, they can erase it, right, from a local high street, but actually we bring it back, 10 times bigger, 100 times bigger even, So on that note, really, sorry, I know I get, I'm passionate about this how we must see on the streets, the way I see it, right? It's very simple. We know for sure there are certain revolutions that were started by just somebody scrolling onto a wall. We know in Syria, as an example, that we know that it just takes something quite profound and something quite incredible about somebody just putting something onto a concrete wall, scribbling something, writing something. It's almost as if that you're challenging power by scrolling something in a place that wasn't designed to be written on, right? And the impact of that and the knock-on effect it has of others who see this message, this wall, this image perhaps, and how it can uplift and empower an entire community, an entire society, just from the actions of just scribbling and making a mark.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to quickly go back to the comments. I know we've kind of been talking quite a bit now, and I want to hear some. I don't know about you, but I want to hear some. I want to see some art. I want to hear some art. I want to hear from Essam doing some of his live poetry as well. So before we do that, quickly, we have Oakland, Amna in Oakland, shout out to, she sent to Oakland CA, shout out to them. Nicola Gould saying, yes, Mohammed, agree with the comments that have been made. Women's history projects about the lack of female representation in statues as well. That's another angle that we haven't explored actually yet. And Hardeep saying, artwork is amazing. The symbolism that is portrayed almost reminds me of a revolution, almost brewing ideology, history in the making. There, I must say, way to go, Mohammed. So you have a new fan, I think, Mohammed, with your artwork as well, and the context of female statues as well. Where's the representation for that? Rashid saying, "What's the blue light out of your window?" He thinks he's saying, "Be careful, the blue light." Mohammed's tried to make this whole cinematic experience with his lovely velvet curtains and his police light in the back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It does, to be honest, it does look like someone's about to knock on your door, Mohammed. I'd just be wary,
All right, man. All right. Oh, man. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I've got that image of Malcolm X in my head where he's peering through the curtain just to see who's outside the window.
Mohammed, didn't your son dress up as Malcolm X for his school project? Maybe you could drop me that image and I'll.
I think for the next live stream I'll have to share that. I was very proud that my son dressed up as Malcolm X on what was it? Was it Black History? It might have been on Black History, something like that. One of those kind of weird days or weeks where I tell a lie. It was a day you have to dress up as some kind of celebrity. That was it. Yeah, because I'm never keen on this Black History Day or Black History Week. For obvious reasons. Why is it restricted to just a day or a month or something like that? But it was actually, he chose someone famous to dress up as, and I have to be honest. I think I planted the idea that he should dress up as Malcolm X, so it didn't entirely come from him.
Yeah. So who knows? Listen, guys. Who knows where what our cities are going to look like after all the dust has settled on all of this? I mean, the idea that all the statues will be toppled and that we'll be walking through a paradise of beautiful urban art on everything. I mean, I think that's probably a bit naive to believe that's going to happen. But certainly, I reckon this stuff has a role to play in, it's the crossing out of certain things, the deleting of certain things, which reminds us, it's the challenge to power, isn't it? That's the heart of it. Reminds us that, other people need voices and representation than those who've historically been empowered. And I'm really interested to see how that negotiation continues in this space looking forward. Should we get some live art going?
Yes,
guys.
Sam, let's do something, man. I'm on my iPad here. You drop some.
Yeah.
Let's play around.
I still have fond
bit,
memories of being in Birmingham with you, Essam, and jamming in what was the old Hubb in the basement of the Bawdsley Centre.
I'm not gonna lie. I reflect on those times a lot, man. I really that was a big part of my journey. This being in Birmingham and connected with the Birmingham community.
Fantastic. That's what we like to hear, man.
Yeah.
So Essam, you've had some time to absorb what we've been talking about, and as an artist, as a poet, as a hip hop artist, as a musician yourself, is there anything or any type of poetry or feelings that you feel are reflected, or you could reflect in, and kind of nicely tie this up in a nice neat bow while we see some art from Mohammed as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna just recite a couple pieces, mix and match, saying, based on the emotions and my reflections. But I think initially it's a lot bigger than what we see on the surface. Like these are, like, before this whole movement, a lot of us community organizers and artists and activists been doing different types of works to impact our communities that have been affected by many generations of trauma, right? And one of those elements is violence and how to, dealing with grief, so I'm gonna share with some pieces just kind of around the discussion we had and the whole experience growing up in these communities, right? You ready, Aerosol?
Yeah, bro. Why not, man?
Can we see what you're doing?
Yeah, if you follow on the live stream, if you look on your laptop, you should see something very shortly. Manpreet, if you could line it up for.
Yeah. A rose is still delicate, even though it may grow from the concrete. Embodied in elegance, trying to walk off the anguish, it runs deep. She losing her son cause the rain keep on falling. Can't witness her own seed bloom. Write your name across the sky before it's written on a tomb. Gotta learn how to live. Instead of spending our lives surviving. Every side done took some losses from all of the senseless violence. Nothing hurts more than to witness mothers crying, loved ones hurting behind curtains, many suffering in silence. Many suffering in silence. We hear the sirens. We hear the sirens. Got us paranoid. Death is a part of life, something we can't avoid. So I've been shooting for my spot. I'm bringing all my folks. Head down, keeping one up top. Gotta defend my own. Eventually, I'm gonna be buried beneath. So why would I sleep for? I work every night and day of the week. I'm plotting like 2-4. I do this for all of my people, gone and not forgotten. Treble, building up the block till we ain't living at the bottom. It goes. I can't stop as long as I'm still breathing. Gonna be starving till my whole family is eating. Late night working, I forgot was sleeping. Country hopping, making moves every other weekend. Know my time is coming soon, I can feel it creeping. Youngin' sliding with they goons, either that or defense. What you tell a kid who witnessed their own brother bleeding? I'm just praying for the day my people find some healing. I'm just praying for the day my people find some healing. In this life that we live, it is flooded with sins. So I turn to Allah and just gotta repent. Raised in the hood in the South and residing, it's hard to survive. So I'm going to school and pursuing and doing what I see is right. Every day I will fight, but my heart is still bleed. We live in this system, they try to kill me and my peeps. My people was dying, why do we not see? My mama, she barely could breathe. She is the reason I'm choosing the road to success. Stressing, I'm blessed. I know that this life is a test. I'm feeling depressed, mind shaking like an earthquake. In the West, it's support hate. Far away from my birthplace. Feels like I'm in the worst place. Still slaves, but there's no change. Trying to keep sane, but the blow up my brain. Physical scars will fade. Emotional pain remains. Nothing has changed. In the West of my home, black bodies get bodied by cops. I say the West of my home. Get arrested for making the clock. And I say the West is my home. My mama, she barely could breathe. And I say the West is my home. My sisters can't walk in the streets. And I say the West is my home. First century throwing up the same fist. 21st century, we throwing up the same fist. Old chains, but they shackled on some new wrists. 21st century, we throwing up the same fist. I said, old chains, but they shackled on some new wrists. The 21st century, we throwing up the same fist. The West is my home. When will there be peace? When will there be justice? I'm praying for my brother Eugene. When will there be peace? When will there be justice? I'm praying for all of the loved ones we lost to injustice. Hands of the police. Praying for peace. When will there be justice?
Amazing, man. Thank you so much, Essam. And I'm conscious that we are now, where are we? 10:15 BST. And 1:15, I think, in your world, Essam, in...
over here,
okay,
2:14 p.m.
Completely off by 2 hours, but that's okay. And James, you are really early as well, right?
It's 7:15 in the morning, and the sun is just about to rise on, well, kind of winter's day here in Melbourne, and it's going to be maybe drop down to the freezing 15 degrees centigrade.
Amazing, man. That's some serious frost. So, I mean, we've had nothing but rain. But Mohammed, to wrap up, I know that you've been drawing a piece as well, and you kind of created the recreation of the iPad on the iPad, the image of Colston being pulled down, and some of the words from Essam's poem.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I'm just exploring here, really, as you saw throughout the conversation. There's no other image, really, when we're talking about public art and the conversation about authorities. Oh, I'm going to change the camera so you can jump back to me. When we're talking about the conversation about public art, you know, the image of a statue being pulled down, I mean, it's just a profound image. And that's kind of, you know, it's the kind of almost David and Goliath, isn't it? These small little figures pulling down this huge, giant-like structure and tugging on it, you know. And that's kind of what I've got here. You probably see it kind of in the background. It kind of was looking like a bit too much like Dubai initially, I'd say, because you had like this long spiral middle. But I think I've sliced that off now because I just felt like that does, for me, represents really, I suppose, you know, capitalist society and, you know, kind of the modern world we live in today. So, yeah, for me, just a simple image of that. And I'd say one of the words of Essam's words, you know, sometimes when I do an image and I just hear his piece, I'm just seeing so many connections when we're talking about justice. He said stuff about being buried underneath, and he mentioned the tomb. And in a way, that's what these structures are, right? These kind of public statues, they're almost capturing you know, or preserving the death of, or almost like representing these tomb-like structures, if you like, you know. So there we have it, man. And it's just making it up as we go along. That's all I've been doing here, really, and not being precious about it, because, you know, this is what I also love doing, and I'm going to do this to end. I haven't done this for a while, but if you pull back to my iPad, also just kind of not being too, as I said about the transient nature, the ephemeral.
Don't ruin it, man.
Oh, you know, sometimes you just got
Did
to...
you save a picture of that?
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of your stronger pieces that we've done here as well. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Hey, send me that picture too, man. I need it.
Oh, it's too late, man. It's too late. It's all gone now.
You just presses the back button.
Thank God. I tell you what, thank God for the undo button. Let's just put it that way, yeah? At least we have, and I have multiple undos with thanks to Steve Jobs. So we're good.
Shout out to the Syrian.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
Oh, look at that. I mean, there's no undo button on a wall with a spray can, is there? There's no undo button for a statue. Or maybe there is. Maybe this will give us people some ideas to go out into the real physical world and start pushing for change. Yeah? Who knows?
That's quite a profound point, I think. There's no undo button on the statues or outside in public. So, yeah, man.
So, I think
and that's even interesting to think about. Like, a lot of people's focus is on the statues and stuff when you could potentially replace these objects, but with human life, you know, is not replaceable, and that's what the fight is for, right? Justice for human life,
for sure,
Black lives, you know.
Well, guys, I think we could probably call it a day now. I think we really enjoyed this session, and having Essam from Seattle all the way over. It's good to connect with you again, Essam.
Of course.
And and we've got Manpreet, who's been manning the decks, doing his radio voice. Always like to hear Manpreet's radio voice.
It's exactly the same as my normal voice.
That's the point, though.
Is it exactly the same?
Yeah.
My wife won't say it the same.
Yeah.
Hey, that's how it is. Hey, people say I sound like I rap when I talk, so I think it's one of those things, man.
You could just record yourself talking and just pretend it's spoken word, Essam. That's how you sound, bro.
Exactly, man. So I think that's the same for you. You know, you got the radio voice on and off radio.
So yeah, and finally we've got James from Melbourne, James Hodkinson, who is Dr. James Hodkinson from the University of Warwick, who are supporters and been sponsors of this show. And remember, every Fridays, we are in season 2 right now, every Friday, UK time, 9 p.m. BST. So do keep connecting, keep spreading the word. We are live on Raise Karma's YouTube channel. As I said, it's a virtual art installation with multiple other kind of shows and live streams that are happening. We are one of those, and we kickstarted it last week for them. And this is the second show going out on the Raise Karma platform. But of course, we'll be uploading this stream onto our Soul City Arts channels on YouTube, onto Facebook, and all of those things as well. But do follow us. Let's do a little kind of shout for each other's social media handles, I'd say, so we can keep connected and keep in tune. Mine are, of course, we've got the Soul City Arts on Instagram and Twitter, but also me personally as well. If you want to get in touch about getting some of these T-shirts as well, it's Ali Aerosol on Instagram and Twitter, ALI Aerosol. If you don't know how to spell aerosol, go and look it up. Yeah. And you guys, you want to share Manpreet and
sure, man. Mine is just at Manpreet, DARROCH. I don't have really anything as interesting as Mohammed on his social media. He has all like really nice pictures and stuff. I just have lots of pictures of my dog and things like that. So, but yeah, no, I do. I have things following the radio journey and some of the interviews that we do via Radio XL. And artist interviews. It'll be good to get Essam on the show at some point to promote his new album. Essam, do you want to give your handles as well of how our people can follow your music and actually enjoy your hip hop artistry, because you've got some amazing music out there, bro, and you should be.
I appreciate you. I'm on all the major platforms, iTunes, Spotify, all that. To search my name, Essam. My album is 12.12 or chapter 26. Chapter 26 is spelled chapter and then 20 SIX. Or you can search my name, Essam Mohammed, on YouTube, and I have videos on YouTube and work online. Or my Instagram handle is Mass139, MASSEONE39.
Fantastic.
And James as well, you want to?
Yeah, probably the best place to find me is on Twitter, I guess. So it's a bit of a middle-aged thing to do now, isn't it, Twitter? But there you go, that's me. So I'm at Dr._James_H, right? So that you'll find me there. You can also find me probably retweeted right by Soul City. So that's me, and I'm going to be sharing stuff there from about popular culture, music, news, current affairs, but also from an academic perspective as well.
Amazing. Do you want to talk a little bit about next week's show, Mohammed? What we're focusing on a little bit.
Not yet. No, I'm joking. Yeah, we do have our show. We've got we're still confirming which guests we're going to have on board, but we've got a number of themes. We're exploring hip hop and the language of hip hop and its evolution and what it means and how it represents. In the same way we've been speaking about graffiti art, it's going to be a bit of an in-depth conversation about hip hop culture and its kind of global impact on urban communities. And of course, we've got other themes like exploring the work of Malcolm X, and his legacy as well. Something that is very, very timely. Both of which actually, hip hop and Malcolm X and these topics, all kind of completely about kind of something for today and common sense.
All right. Thank you so much, man. Thank you everybody for joining, and thank you for all the comments. Thank you for joining us on Raise Karma as we explore different topics through the Raise Karma installation. And there's going to be some videos on their platform very shortly as well from all these other artists. So thank you so much, guys, and thank you, James and Essam, for joining us as well, man.
No worries.
No, man, thank y'all. It was nice connecting with you again, Manpreet and James, and Aerosol. I appreciate every single one of y'all. Thank you for having me in the space.
All right, bro. Thanks, bro.
Yeah.